And so we're back again for the news. This is like prophetic news. I'm telling you, if we just take a look at what's in like the newspaper, I want to start doing this because I had a friend of mine that once said, unless as an intercessor, you can pick up the newspaper and read the headlines and know what's happening and have a prophetic perspective, how can you pray? And so let's do this because it's you really discover what's behind the headlines as it happens. First of all, of course, we got the great shutdown, the great devastating shutdown that President Trump is initiating, which, by the way, is the result of some strong believers and conservatives meeting with him when he was considering maybe not doing this, and it was urged that this is your moment. And this guy is so amazing; he will take the challenge. This is just an incredible president. But let's put this wall in perspective. Here's what you're never hearing in all of the crazy talk that you've got going on. You're not hearing about what is happening on the border. Part of our team today, Mercedes Sparks, is up in Washington. I was going to be there. I had a meeting in Dallas. But she went up and was literally at the press club where they were covering the data and the stories from moms on the border. These are mothers that are dealing with what they are encountering on the border as people that live there. They have one woman who was taken in from from at the border from the caravan trips, who was so ill they had to put her into a special hospitalization situation. They found 50 DNA samples on the inside of her, and I said, "Well, what I'm calling? But what does that mean?" 50 men had raped her in the process of her coming in. It's just incredible the tragic stories that you're hearing about. And how so many of the men that leave, that come across the border from Mexico, and so you see dominantly it's a lot of males that are there, that when they come in with the promise that they're going to send money back to their wives. And the women in Mexico, she said, here's the other part, that the women in Washington that are at this conference are talking about. The women in Mexico hate America for this reason. The men leave out of economic desperation. They come up, they send checks back for 2 months, 3 months, and then they find another woman in America and they cut off the funding and they raise another family. I mean, does that not sound like a probability if you think about it? So the cost of this, the wall that can go up, when you look at the totality of the American budget, and we're talking like $4 trillion is the American budget. You know how much that wall comes out to? So it's like, what is it, 400 billion out of the 4 trillion. Put it in perspective. That's $47 out of a $50,000 budget. If you reduce all those huge numbers down to something we could relate to, right? It's having a $50,000 annual budget for the entire, let's say, government, and $47 of it is to secure your country's borders. And that's what the Democrats are fighting. The Democrats wanted this. They wanted this wall under, they wanted this secure border, and they made it part of their platform, part of their State of the Union appeal. I could quote for you Bill Clinton. I played it before. Stronger than Trump. I can quote Barack Obama. They're not going to have any border there now. And the reason is because the Democratic Party is interested in they will not shut down the pipeline to an infinite number of poor or underclass people who make the new voting constituency. Because at an overwhelming rate, when people come into the United States, they want to get everything they can get out of the country, and they'll vote Democrat to get it. And so what you have is a socialist shift happening in America, not only in the universities, where 45% of our taxpayer-funded education is training our kids to be Marxists. 45% of the professors are avowed Marxists. Now, no wonder millennials are coming out overwhelmingly infatuated with socialism. So there's not going to be any shutdown, but the drug trafficking is going to continue. Without that wall, you're going to have these tragic stories of people and children and women that are being caravanned across and brought in. You're going to have this complete undermining of our government. Our schools get overrun, our hospitals, our costs of entitlements we're already like 22 trillion. You understand the American economy is on a bubble. The biggest threat we have is that bubble bursting and America not being able to recover. And so that's what I've always said. I wrote it in my book. This is the great danger of what happens if Trump doesn't succeed. And he's like one man against this whole system. In this shutdown, Bernie Sanders today was complaining, and he got it right here in the news. So I'll give it to you. And he's complaining because 95% of the Environmental Protection Agency employees have been furloughed. Now, 95% of the non-essential EPA, these are the non-essential employees at the Environmental Protection Agency. So my question is, if you got 95% of the employees there are non-essential, how many of these employees that are on the government bureau? We're talking about, I don't know how many. It's a shocking figures we're getting. Like about 3 million employees are working for the government, and how many of them are non-essential? I'll bet you a ton of them are non-essential. They're all part of this bloated tick of government waste that is there. And it's not like people can't get jobs, but of course it's going to be hard to get those jobs if you keep on bringing people into the country that you're going to have to fund, because the economy is not only going to be able to endure so much. All right, so let me. The other thing that happened today, it's big news, is that Pelosi told the president that he can't do the State of the Union address. So they're kicking in gear now. This is the waterboarding. This hasn't even hit the Inquisition yet of Trump and his family. It's the first stage of the dysfunction in America. It's going to go to a new level. So Pelosi says, no, there's going to be no State of the Union for you. Trump retaliated by canceling the use of the government's jets for her and her colleagues to do a whirlwind tour of Afghanistan and these other countries. Now, personally, I don't think it's a great advantage to have people that are adversarial to the president going around cavorting with global leaders, assuring them that they're really in power, because that just destabilizes Trump's position. So Trump said, you can't go. If you want to go, you'll have to fly commercial. The government's not going to pay for it. You need to stay here and work on this negotiation with me. So you'll see that in the news. That was kind of crazy. So let's hit the top headline here, which is UE faces U.S. criminal probe. Now, most people, we'll kind of like, I know we're busy people. We work all the time. It's like, well, I don't know what that is. We walk past it. Hold it. I highlighted the key word here in orange. I'm doing the news for you here. The key word in orange, China. What is this about? It says federal prosecutors are pursuing a criminal investigation of China's Huawei Technologies company for allegedly stealing trade secrets. Oh, here's the news flash. China has thousands of people in the United States that are supposedly doing business when in fact they're all part of the totalitarian reach into our technology to steal, to copy, to do espionage at every opportunity in order to knock off America's competitiveness, because we're not competing with business in China, we're competing with a government. So this is not like we have business and we have government and then we have business and then we have government. In China, they control the business. So the government has their people here doing everything they can. And this is one of the great tragedies or travesties that's happening with dealing with China, is that they knock off everything they can because they're in economic warfare until they achieve military capacity. So that's a China situation when you see that name up there. It has to do with China espionage. And then I'll tell you what, we have a weird title here. ISIS claims deadly strike in Syria, 4 Americans killed. Now, you know what? Before I heard about Stark and Comey and Brennan and Clapper and all these guys in the deep state, I used to think I used to read these headlines like they were real. Now I don't. You know what I read? I read Trump is pulling out of Syria and Afghanistan. So there's trillions of dollars of money that is affected in people's hands when Trump changes his policy. So you know what they're doing? I really do. I suspect to what degree. This is the kind of dark journalism you're not going to hear much except in certain parts of the internet. But how do we know that this incident here isn't somehow coordinated with contractors and others who make money off of global conflict? And now you're seeing headlines suddenly about it. But before we even pull out, Americans are being killed by ISIS. Americans are being killed by ISIS. And what's the purpose of this in the news media. It's to get the president and the American people thinking, well, maybe we shouldn't be pulling out of these places. ISIS is still on the rise. ISIS is killing people. So I'm suspicious as heck of the military adventure. Until Trump can clean out the deep state, I don't trust these headlines. I trust Trump. I don't trust these. So what the heck is going on with ISIS suddenly having a resurgence as though we can't pull out of there, Mr. President? So you see how the game is being played? You and I are getting smart now, figuring out there's something fishy in Denmark. What do we got here? Okay, keep going. This is juicy. Right over here, we got this headline going on. This one is masculinity isn't a sickness. This is what you got to read. You never see this one except maybe in the Washington. What do we got here? The Wall Street Journal. Now this is powerful. In my practice as a psychotherapist, I've seen an increase of depression in young men. He might as well say young white males, because the whole attack on white patriarchy is creating this ghastly effect on young white kids who are believing and drinking in this toxic Kool-Aid that's hitting them in all of the media bombardment and academic bombardment. But this psychologist says there's an increase in depression. And not only that, but there's an increase in suicide among young men. And it's all because we're beating on them and we're saying there's something wrong with them. So new guidelines from the American Psychological Association defining traditional masculinity as a pathological state. Imagine that, traditional masculinity. In other words, the fact that you've got testosterone in you at a higher level than females, and that you're, by God's design, the hunter-gatherer and the protector, that's wrong. That's toxic. You should curb that testosterone, because that's making you toxic. So he says here that this is the American Psychological Association. I'll tell you what, academics can be bought. That's a fact, Jack. And especially because they're all in that liberal culture of the academia infiltrated by the left so strongly. So the academics are bought off. They'll give you a report on anything you want for the right price. And so, but this guy here is a psychologist, and I commend him for having the courage to say this. He says the APA asserts flatly that traditional masculinity is marked by stoicism. You know what stoicism is? It's the ability to detach yourself from pain. It's what you need if you're enduring. Remember that word endurance? I think America doesn't understand endurance. Pray to God we don't get tested on that, because we don't have a whole lot of it. But it says here, the marked by stoicism, or the absence of emotion, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is on the whole harmful, the Psychological Association says, under the influence of their feminist and liberal resources. APA claims that masculinity is to blame for the oppression of women. How about masculinity is to be there for the protection of women, which is why disproportionately men volunteer and go to work in places where there's high risk and high physical danger, and they will go to war because they will do that to protect their families. These knuckleheads. So the association urges therapists to help men identify how they have been harmed by discrimination against those who are gender nonconforming. That's an ideological claim that transformed into a clinical treatment recommendation. So they're saying we need to help men understand how they've been harmed by discrimination against those who are gender nonconforming. They're not conforming to the male gender category. But the writer here says that the truth is masculine traits such as aggression, competitiveness, and protective vigilance not only can be positive, there's a newsflash, but also have a biological basis. Oh boy, the left hates this. Supposedly they're all about science. They're not science. It's pseudoscience. The whole gender deal is pseudoscience. He says, hey man, there's biological data. This is like Jordan Peterson territory here, that boys and men produce more testosterone. That's biology. And that's associated with behavior that includes aggression and competitiveness. They also produce more vasopressin, a hormone originating in the brain that makes them aggressively protective of loved ones. Oh my God, God designed then so that they would be aggressively protective of their wives, their daughters, and their children. Now the same goes for feminine traits such as nurturing and emotional sensitivity. What? You mean to say that there's a difference between men and women? Biologically, women produce more oxytocin. Oxytocin. There was a movie out years ago about well, I won't go into that right now, but it was about this artificial child that was born, and that what was it? Artificial intelligence? No, it was a gene. What do you call it? When you go into a laboratory and you create a human being, and DNA, right? So they created a laboratory child, and the mother's oxytocin was not bonding with him, and but here again, women produce more oxytocin, and when they nurture their children, they're more nurturing than men, and the hormones affects men and women differently. Oxytocin makes women more sensitive and empathetic, while men become more playfully, tactually stimulating with their children. They wrestle with them, they play with them, they tickle them and stuff like that. All that toxic masculinity. And these differences between men and women complement each other, allowing a couple to nurture and challenge their offspring. So modern society is too derisive towards women who embrace their biological tendencies to nurture. They punish them, for instance, for staying at home and having children. And now you're finding out, and Jordan Peterson's data is on this, that by robbing women of the idea that being able to have a family and raise children is actually not only necessary in society, but it's emotionally and mentally fulfilling for women as well, by making it seem like, you can't be a mother and also have a destiny. The fact is that women and families are hurt by this new brand of wacky feminism. So what's unhealthy isn't masculinity or femininity, but the demeaning of masculine men and feminine women, putting them down. Young men experiencing depression, higher suicide. You know why now? What's unhealthy isn't the masculinity, it's the psychology and the social justice warriors who are trying to reprogram our brains perpetually. So anyway, the first of the new APA guidelines urges psychologists to recognize that masculinities are constructed based on social, cultural, and contextual norms. In other words, if your child was raised gender neutral, dressed in gender neutral clothes, able to identify their own gender when they get older, well, you'll find that all this will be reversed, except for what's happened in studies that we now have in, I think it's in Iceland, where they've been practicing this radical social re-engineering for years. You know what they found out? A disproportionate number of the males, even though they're being brought up in this gender neutral kind of psychology, they move towards things and engineering, and women move towards the sociology and the feeling and people professions. Why? Because it's the biology. So it's like flies right in the face of what all the social engineers are trying to prove, because they're doing it in Europe, and the boys are going in one direction, the girls are going in another by choice and preference. Now, why can't the APA acknowledge biology while seeing femininity and masculinity on a spectrum? Yeah, I know that there'll be mixed martial artist girls that are also going to have higher testosterone, and they could beat up most guys. But on the other continuum, you have let's face it, most of your prison population is male. I get that, but that's because of the design in the species in terms of aggression. And you and I would say that if you raise them without a father, you've increased the likelihood of them being criminal by like 60 or 70%. So they don't have male discipline and restraint, the very things that are being vilified in our culture. So it's wrong to be telling boys that aggression and competitiveness and protectiveness is a sign of sickness. No wonder they're depressed. The same is true for telling girls that the desire to be nurturing and feminine is shameful. I took a little more time with that because I knew you would enjoy those incendiary little thoughts. And so all the trolls that follow me, I wanted to give you something to be upset about. Not you guys, you're not trolls, but I do have them. Oh, here's another one. Okay, man, the new Big Brother. Check this one out. You guys tracking with me on the prophetic news? We're doing a prophetic news cycle right here, so you guys can see how prophecy in the news works. This isn't all about predicting stuff. It's about having eyes that see. So what's this about the new Big Brother? Well, we're in the age of surveillance capitalism. This is a great article. It says that Google, Facebook, and increasingly Amazon and Microsoft are in the big data business. Boy, this is scary when you start looking for the new generation that wants big government and big data, and then they want to start bottling up people like you and me who have opinions they don't want to hear. So anyway, the researcher on this subject, Mr. Zaboff, is a retired, is it a Mrs.? I think it's a Miss Zaboff, is a retired Harvard Business School professor, assumes the role of social anthropologist. That's what this person does, arguing that the scheme of surveillance and the marketplace it serves poses a threat, not just to conventional notions of privacy, but to our autonomy as individuals and ultimately to a democratic society. Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball. And so this is her research on this thing. And she says that, that the reason why this has come out, now, of course, like if you're in the marketing and internet marketing and stuff like this, of course, we like the targeted features that we're able to more tightly, like for instance, do you think that my kind of broadcast that is going to talk about positively about Donald Trump and pray for him is going to go over great in a lot of left-wing camps? Obviously not. So that rather than the old advertising approach of spray and pray is what they called it in mass media, advertisers can now at least theoretically reach only the customers who are predisposed to buy their wares. Well, that's the worm on the hook that gets us into the world of big data, where they start harvesting and watching everything you do and even listening to your conversations. That'll freak out if you know how many people are listening to you. Never underestimate the appeal of certainty, she says, or the propensity for hubris. You know what Google's mission is? You guys will freak out when you hear this one. Google's stated mission is to organize the entire world's information. Oh boy, I really want you organizing the whole world's information. When you fire an employee because as an engineer he gives you feedback that women aren't advancing in Google at the level of the engineering profession, probably because of a predilection or a design issue within females, which is now being verified by data that I'm giving you. But the guy got fired for giving that report to Google executives, and he did it as an open-minded Silicon Valley young researcher. He learned you got to be politically correct if you're going to be open-minded. So anyway, we're going to be talking about the merging of technology and humanity, and a thing called singularity is going to be coming up on the horizon, where we're going to have these computer capacities perhaps programmed into us. Well, that's an interesting idea. So why is it that we put up with this? Why do we allow this assimilation of our personal sovereign identities to be data assimilated and all the data and this database to be shared and start to stalk us and watch us and be used for all kinds of potentially nefarious purposes? Well, the researcher lists some reasons. One of them is that they already know everything about me anyway. People say, well, they already know everything about me, where I live, they know what I buy, blah, 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 blah. The second reason is I'm not doing anything wrong. I mean, I'm not, laundering drugs. I mean, I'm not doing emails, with the black market. I don't care who reads my stuff. And then the third reason is nobody cares about me personally. They're not possibly paying attention to little old me. Well, the first two responses suggest a level of profound resignation, but the third betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of how the whole big data world works. And yeah, those companies do care about you personally. That's the whole point. They really do. Are you ready for this? China, by the way, spent more money last year on surveillance technology of their people than they did on the military. And you realize that China right now has made a decision that if you're under 18 years of age, you cannot go to church with your parents. That's scary. Can't go with your parents to church in China. Didn't hear that in any news outlets, did you? That's because Trump might have had Russian dressing on a salad 3 years ago, linking him to Russia. All right, so what indeed, in a TV interview last week, this is crazy, right? The primate of the Russian Orthodox Church, I'll face it when I read, the primate of the Russian Orthodox Church warned that the proliferation of personal data and its potential for misuse could trigger the coming of the Antichrist. It's the Wall Street Journal. Ah! There are times when Mrs. Zuboff seems almost melodramatic, but her case is stronger when she marshals facts. Like the tale of Facebook's 2007 launch of Beacon, a feature would automatically share information about all the users' purchases. But the Russian Orthodox Church, I don't know. When you talk about Russia, I'm kind of interested in that thing. What about Trump's Middle East strategy? What's going on there? Well, you got to realize Iran. We're forgetting about Iran. Sheep nations and goat nations, people. China's right now moving more towards that goat nation status. Keep an eye on China. And Iran, bad actor right now. What do we got here? I'm talking about the governments now. I'm talking not the people, the governments. So even if Washington succeeds in controlling its herd of allies in the Middle East, the article says, it must still orchestrate an effective strategy to do what? To roll back Iran's influence, because it's hard. They've already invaded Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. Iranian influence is deeply entrenched, and they want to wipe Israel off the map. Oh boy. So it's a safe bet that Russia, Iran, and to some extent China are looking for ways to block Donald Trump's success, linking together Saudi Arabia, the more moderate Sisi in Egypt, and Israel in an effort to try to keep Iran from fomenting terrorism, unrest, and chaos in the Middle East. And so Pompeo is working hard on this. Bolton was talking to the Kurds. We got a lot of Christians in Kurdistan, and the Kurds are great people. And one of the big downsides of Trump pulling out for many of us that are Christians is that how's that going to affect the Kurds, especially when Turkey is an avowed enemy of the Kurds and is capable of doing atrocities. Oh yeah, Turkey's not always a good actor either. So let's see. I want you to catch some of this, because I want to read to you. Oh, I had a great quote here, but it had to do with Benjamin Netanyahu talking about how. Oh yeah, here he goes. Benjamin Netanyahu described Turkish President Recep Erdogan as an anti-Semitic dictator whose army massacres women and children in Kurdish villages. Well, probably some trouble there in terms of those guys all getting along. Oh, but wait a second. This new guy who was just put in, Barr, the attorney general, the new attorney general that took Jeff Sessions' place. And so much for all the we got to go back and clean up some Q predictions there about Sessions working theatrically with the fallout with Trump so that he could deliver those 3,000 indictments for all of the pedophiles that are supposed to go to Guantanamo or whatever that thread was that people are listening to. I knew that one was bogus. Did you? So Barr pledges to let Mueller finish. Why? He couldn't become attorney general unless the Democrats were told. And this is weird. Lindsey, what's with Lindsey, man? Lindsey Graham. One day he flashes brilliant. The next day he crashes on the rocks. Anyway, so Graham wants to make sure, are we going to really be able to, we're going to complete that Mueller investigation, aren't we? A lot of help you are, Lindsey. So anyway, the attorney general was allowed to be approved, or as long as he's behind the Mueller probe. So they're going to be able to complete that Russian investigation. And then what? Well, I'll tell you what's next. You know what it's going to be. They already said it. What's his name? Schiff. Mr. Shifty. He's going to go after, along with the rest of the Democrats, they're going to go after like every area of Trump's life to try to drag him through. They're going to waterboard him journalistically and politically. And you and I are going to get really mad when that happens. So it'll be interesting to see how the populace responds. Anyway, they're going to go after him over embezzling funds and fiduciary corruption and tax evasion. I'll predict that one well in advance. So anyway, Mr. Barr who has criticized aspects of the investigation would seek to shut it down, curtail it, or keep the results a secret. That's what the Democrats are worried about. But he assured them that he won't. That he's got to play a little bit of politics with those guys. You guys tracking with all this? You want me to talk about Representative King taking off panels and being moved and being basically burned in effigy over a statement that he made that it was twisted into a condoning of white nationalists, which is, of course, the danger for anybody that dares to say that Western civilization and the whole attack on the male patriarchy that's going on with the social craziness out there with the liberals. That he's saying, when did this start to become in vogue, where European and males of European descent and Americans are all being vilified, and of course then his comments are being taken out of context, and if you don't say it exactly right, you'll end up like Milo. Okay. One final piece of information here. You guys tracking me on the news? Listen, this is important stuff I'm giving you right now. I'm giving you how to read with prophetic eyes what the news is really saying now that we have eyes to see in the Trump era. What we never saw before is pray for government, pray for revival, pray for awakening, and then, well, I'm neither Democrat or Republican. I'm just believing Jesus. And so, I hear that every now and then. I understand what people are trying to say. They're trying to say that I don't want to get caught up in partisan politics. I don't want to alienate people that I could possibly minister to. Agreed. However, are we really saying there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats? Certainly in the platforms. Certainly when it comes to the wall. Certainly when it comes to abortion. Certainly when it comes to with the manifesto of the LGBT transgender phenomena. Or the new breed of Marxists coming into the government with the midterm. Let's talk about what we're discovering about that last midterm election. You guys want to do that? Come on, man. You guys, this is really cool stuff. This is exciting. You're not going to get this on your typical Christian television program. I'm going to tell you that right now. Maybe Huckabee. That's about it. So here we go. As Democrats move from the success of 2018. We have data now that's going. Does it hold the key Democrat voter today? Are they the younger liberals and the rebellious? It looks like younger liberals and rebellious, and they recruited a bunch of females. Remember the vagina hat protest of 100,000 women, which basically was so radically like left-wing Soros type funded. I know I was in the Washington Hilton when they were marching. It was crazy. And I saw, I took a picture of it, the 20 organizations that are being funded to throw this. This wasn't a spontaneous uprising of offended women. This was an activist assembly to try to get women to run off of some kind of fake outrage over Donald Trump's improprieties from a decade ago, which was only really, which really wasn't even as bad as what's currently going on in Washington. Donald Trump cleaned up his act a decade ago. Okay, so anyway, Ocasio-Cortez, the 29-year-old activist, became the youngest congresswoman ever, and she really appears to be pushing her party to the left. But let me share with you something. It's very important for those of you that care about the future of America, because as America goes, so goes the world. As Trump goes, so goes the American economy. I don't know if you guys are hearing that in your prophecies over 2019, but I think you ought to think about that. So here's the deal, Lucille. It's certainly true that there was a lot of energy among young liberal Democrats in 2018, and that figures to be true again in the new presidential cycle. Yet the Democratic electorate in 2018, listen to this, the one that swung House seats and governor's offices from Republican to Democrat, was neither as young or as liberal as everybody says. This is all a bunch of fake news hype with Ocasio, because they're just trying to, the media has got a spirit on it, man. It just wants to foment crazy youth rebellion and Marxism. So anyway, only 15% of the voters that affected the midterms, catch that? 15% were actually age 18 to 29. The largest contingent of Democratic voters, 36%, were between the ages of 45 and 64. Ooh, wait a second. There's no doubt the party's moving to the left. Clearly, that's where the media wants to go. An increasing share of Democrats are identifying themselves as liberal. They're not even embarrassed about the term. They used to deny it. They used to call themselves progressive. And they said, forget progressive. We're just liberals. And yet that movement also can be overstated, because half of Democratic voters last year identified themselves as liberal. 48% call themselves moderate. Wait a second. 48%, nearly half of the Democrats said, no, I'm not liberal. I am a moderate. Moderate. Oh, that's kind of interesting. They're moderates, and they outnumbered the very liberal voters by 2 to 1. That tells you something. And here is the danger the Democrats are about to walk into. They're going to assault Trump like a bunch of crazy liberals but they got voted in because they ran as common sense moderates. But you see, when the mask comes off, America's going to give them a backlash in favor of Trump if they do what they're programmed to do, which is attack, attack, attack. So let's see what happens. It's been widely noted that the key voters in 2018 were white suburban women. That's that European influence again. But it's white suburban women showed up in large numbers to vent their angst with Donald Trump. Yeah, because they're just constantly getting worked up by this spirit in America that's trying to stir up angry women and angry minorities, angry Hispanics and angry African Americans. But we all know Trump's the one that has the anger problem, except he manifests a remarkable calculus in his display of rambunctiousness. So let me just read this for a second. So I want to give you the geography for this, because this left-wing insurrection that's taking place could actually work against the Democrats. But remember this geographically. We're going to have to focus on these three states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, because it's the industrial swing states that are the heart of the Democrats' movement. Democrats nominated moderates for governor in all three states. Moderates, not radical socialists. Ooh. Well, this will be very interesting. Now, Joe Biden, 76 years old. Let's see, he'll be 78 years old. You know what I like about Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump? And how old is Warren? Certainly Sanders. You know what I love about that? Those of us that are in our 60s, we're the spring chicks on the block. Life ain't over, people, when you hit 60. You can run for president when you're nearly 80, according to the Democratic Party anyway. And so, although Trump has the energy, I would say, of a precocious teen. So, all right. So, I think I'm not done yet. You guys, want to stop? I'm giving you the prophetic views that are in the news, and I'm telling you these things. If you read the headlines with this revelation, I guess I'm going over my time limit here. I should stop, but let me just take a second to get my news off the floor. I know I got something else I wanted to share with you. Let's see. Hemp crops set to explode. If you want to make some investments for the future, not all of these are this isn't like marijuana. This is hemp, although it does have psychotropic ingredients that deliver a high to marijuana users. I'm not quite sure. I feel so badly about investing in the rise of marijuana. I mean, it's kind of like I always think about that. Here, you want to know why I worry about that? Because remember, it reminds me of like the Kennedy curse. About poor Kennedys, man. I remember when I grew up, I kept thinking it's like a curse in that family. It's terrible what keeps happening to them. But then I talk about how the old man had was smuggling alcohol, and how many lives did he impact for making his millions off of liquor running during Prohibition. Oh, UK Brexit. This is another piece of news you got to get. When Brexit happened, I knew Trump was part of a populist insurgency. See, Brexit was the Brits getting out of the European Union, moving away from being assimilated by Brussels, Belgium, and the one-worlders over there in Europe. They just wanted their autonomy, and they didn't like what was happening with all the Muslims invading their territory, because, as they know, the Islamic invasion into your culture, they are of all demographic people groups the most difficult to assimilate into a European culture. They don't really assimilate because they maintain their cultural identity in the sense that they become a cohesive block that never becomes integrated into a sharing of the same greater culture. Now, to some extent, you're going to say, well, they got the mayor of London, all that, and he's Muslim. But the point is, they're looking at this which is the reason why in Hungary and in the Czech Republic and in Poland and in those countries, they're putting up the wall, so to speak, because they're recognizing that they do not want to have their culture decimated by people coming in that are breaking it up and have no continuity with their own history, their own language, their own customs, or their own Judeo-Christian values. That's interesting. So they're going to be called nationalists and all that stuff. But what I want to tell you about this Brexit thing is Donald Trump gave Theresa May advice when she met him. Oh, she dismissed it. What does he know? He gave her shrewd advice. The Trumpmeister knows what he's talking about. You know what he told her? Make your deal fast. Make it while you got momentum. It won't be perfect. You can always do some negotiating later, but get a deal now while you got it. If you wait 6 months, it's going to, and this is the danger. It's going to happen with Trump's revolution. He's an icebreaker. He's an icebreaker. Boom, 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 boom. He's a wrecking ball. But you know what happens when that icebreaker goes through? If it doesn't have other ships moving behind it that are opening wide the sea lane, the ice solidifies behind the icebreaker. It's exactly what the Democrats are doing right now. The ceiling behind Trump, and the whole movement is to destroy him and get back to business as usual, bankrupting America, swelling the Democratic rolls with people that are dependent upon the government, collapsing the American economy, if you want my opinion. Not the Democrats aren't trying to do that. It's the global money people, the big bank people, and the folks that are into the global economic gain. They don't want America on the scene. They want to, and they're working with this weird spirit. It's like a spirit of lawlessness that really wants a one world system. So anyway, she's screwed up, and now she's paying the price because she was so much smarter than Donald Trump, who didn't need to give her any advice, but she should have listened to him. I could give you more here. Maybe I'll save this till later because we got other stuff. But one more thing. Oh my gosh, this is what you remember I told you about how the Democrats, once they get in there, it's gonna be talking about Winter is Coming from HBO. Game of Thrones. These people have produced a nuclear freeze on us in terms of the wrong kind of freeze, nuclear disaster. So here's what they're saying here. Washington House Democrats plan to target. Who in the world haven't they targeted? They punish everybody. If Trump has someone taking care of his dog, he's gonna get indicted. But the Washington Democrats plan to target who? The White House Chief of Staff, Mike Mulvaney. The Chief of Staff's going to go under an investigation? For what? Nothing to do with Russia. Doesn't matter. We'll investigate him for something else. Because he was the head of the Federal Consumer Finance Agency. And Representative Maxine Walters, she took the gavel and she's already hunting heads to bash. Doesn't care if they're innocent. She's looking for a Republican cranium in association with Trump. Representative Maxine Walters of California is the new leader of the House Financial Services Committee. See why you got to think about the economy now. What happens when people like this get a hold of things? And what's she going to do? Oh, she's going after this guy. Why? Because she's on her way. It is buried in the article. You got to read what's buried. Scary what's buried. What's her plan? The panel's top Democrat said she's called for hearings on companies alleged to have harmed consumers. How do they do that? She said the committee under her leadership is going to investigate Deutsche Bank. Over what? Trump. Any family business dealings with Trump. They want to open up anything they could find on him. And they're going to go to Deutsche Bank and any business dealings they have that predate, 2016? Doesn't matter. I'm telling you, they're going to try to bust him on his financial past. And that just is so sucky. He's a guy that won't even, like for everyone there not to take a salary like he does. He's not taking a salary. He's been in a perpetual shutdown in terms of taking a salary. So anyway, but the final thought here is that Maxine Walters is going to go after Trump over family business dealings. Yep, they're going to try to get Donnie up there, and that's going to go down like a rat sandwich for the rest of America. And I'll cover some of this other news later on. You see what I mean? Prophetic news means you read about the Middle East, you read about the economy. I have something in there which is Davos, and they're concerned about, oh man, I should find that one. Davos is concerned about global warming. These are the one-worlders. I had somebody recently write to me, Lance, I'm going off to Davos, and they're all excited because they're naive. Davos is where the one-worlders, the globalists, professors, and here we go. Final thought. Davos. It's the one-worlder gathering of the elite where they meet to eat. So anyway, the World Economic Forum asked 1,000 business, policy, and thought leaders. Don't think you were invited, were you? I wasn't. And which hosts its annual meeting in Switzerland next week. It's been doing this for 14 years, gathering the one world global, elites together. And of course, they're concerned about they're worried about the future. And these CEOs are all being surveyed. What do you think the worries are? Well, of course, there's cyber attacks. There's state conflict. They should have been worried about North Korea. Nobody saw about North Korea. They should credit Trump with shutting down the nuclear threat, but they don't want to talk about that. The asset bubbles, yeah, like the inflation that takes place when the money supply is giving money to people that shouldn't have it, and bubbles take place in the market. But they're concerned about data fraud. Tons of data fraud going on right now. Like it's like the new Wild West, pulling over the train, pulling over the stagecoach and robbing you with your data. But natural disasters is also a concern. But the real concern is failure of climate policies. Failure of climate policies. It's interesting. Macron of France lectured the president arrogantly at the celebration of what was it? They were celebrating the American alliance with Europe in the First World War, and of course the Second World War. And so Macron took it to lecture America about like toxic masculinity, toxic national interest. And he said and the climate, Paris climate peace. Remember the climate accords in Paris? And he's talking like the globalists, like the refined one-worlder, and that we got to stop looking at making America great again and these individual nations. We have to look at ourselves more as a borderless world, an entity, a global community. Right, okay, got the idea. Sounds good until you try to think about it. Open up your door at night and let the neighbors in. Matter of fact, don't lock the door. Why have a door? Why have a wall? Anyone can come in. And by the way, why don't they have a right to your refrigerator? So he's lecturing the president. President doesn't say anything. But then a week later, this is that Trumpian boomerang I've seen happen so often with people. He's suddenly got these people in yellow jackets. I got my gold jacket on. I have yellow jackets. And what are they doing? The whole country is up in arms because he's pushing his climate policies on an economy that can't afford it. And there was an immediate backlash from the population. And then he got 70,000, 50,000. You got a massive protest going on and still going on. And he had to walk himself back. And Trump says, I tried to tell him. Because those policies, when they translate into putting the burden of the climate theory on to the laborer and the working person, the working man and woman, it crushes them. So they pushed back, and he backed up. But they're not stopping because their revolution and their pushback is more just like the Brits. They're not happy with the way in which the government is sucked into a bureaucratic system of European Union that isn't reflective of the real gains and the real interests that the people elected him to represent for France. Makes sense, doesn't it? All right. Well, anyway, that's my incendiary news and views. But you gotta think about it. If you can read the newspaper and look at those headlines and see them for what they are, it's amazing what you come up with. I mean, it's right here in the news, people. Everything. College debt. Oh, deters young home buyers. You think so? You think so? Hey, why is it that these Marxist professors are all for free education? They're not paying for it. You're going to pay for it. By the way, those degrees they're getting in gender studies and in in all their crazy left-wing courses that don't actually employ you when you get out into the marketplace. No wonder college kids, you know what college kids would be better off doing? Not going to college, going into the marketplace, saving their money, buying a house. If the economy was strong for the last 5 years, they could sell the house, and then while they got a job, start going to night school, correspondence school, and finesse their resume. And they're already ahead of everybody else who's leaving college without an employable marketplace skill, unless they want to go to work for the government, and trying to get off of college debt, bitter and resentful because they're saddled with debt that the academic and university system put on them because they never control their prices. Their prices go up, 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 while they're insisting there should be free education. They're going to still get paid. Somebody's going to pay for that free education. Socialists still haven't figured that out. Okay, well, that's the news. I challenge you to share it with other people. And well, let's pray. Let's pray. It's always nice to end on the appropriate note because what I'm sharing with you isn't necessarily. I'm reading Lincoln here. I'm reading Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's Mystic Course of Memory the other day, and I kept thinking about the house divided because my prophecy was that there wouldn't be a red wave and there wouldn't be a blue wave. There was going to be a house divided. Why? Because America is in a civil war, culturally and socially. And if the left continues, it will be politically and economically. And Lincoln, well, it was in 1858, he gave his House divided speech at the Illinois State Convention. And he said regarding slavery, the great issue of that day, he said, in my opinion, under the operation of the policies we have right now, this agitation has not only not ceased, but this agitation is going to be constantly increased and augmented. Now listen to the prophetic word of Lincoln. In my opinion, it will not cease until a crisis shall have been reached and passed. America is heading into its crisis. A house divided against itself cannot stand. He quotes Jesus. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall. But I do expect it will cease to be divided, because it will become all one way or another. It's either going to be all slave or all free. Wow. Either the opponents of slavery will arrest that further spread of it and place it where the public mind shall rest in the belief that it is in course of ultimate extinction, or its advocates will push it forward until it shall become alike lawful in all the states, old as well as new, north as well as south. Have we no tendency already to that latter condition? So we pray that America isn't going to be a house divided, that truth is actually going to rise up, and that the courage is going to be in abundance in America in the days to come, and that we'll find winsome ways of bridging the divide into the middle, where the moderates are, into the middle. And it will require that we're very articulate and powerful in pushing back on the errors of the extreme left and the destructive trajectory of their policies if they continue to assault the stability of America by trying to take the president down and waterboard him in front of us. I pray, Father, in Jesus' name, that you will grant to us the ability to rise above the conflict, to be in our position in third heaven, above principalities and powers, rulers and dominions of darkness, that we'll be able to go up, seated with Christ in heavenly places. But from that position, Lord, I pray that you will enable us to descend aligned and congruent, coherent, and engaged and unified and active in securing and protecting the freedom of America by having new, winsome, powerful voices, multiplying the truth as you expose the reality and the truth of what is in the underbelly of the lie. I pray for the deep state, Lord, will continue to be exposed, that there is going to be a pushback and a revelation and a tearing of the veil of the conspiracies of people that have been using and misusing the offices that we have entrusted them to, and have been using them for political purposes of personal ambition to destroy the innocent under any pretense. I pray, Lord, that truth will prevail. And I pray, Lord, that there's going to come a new unity between black and white, between Hispanic and African American, and that the Asian people that are being right now pushed away at Harvard and being disrespected in their role within our culture, that they also are going to have a new place of revival. That in the black community, in the Hispanic community, in the Asian community, and in the white community, that there will be new healing, new lovers, new wise and insightful individuals rising up, and that the middle of America will come together, that there'll be a healing in the middle, and that we'll be able to move towards righteousness for the sake of the unborn, for the protection of our sovereignty as a nation, for the preservation of the United States in its world order, for the draining of the toxicity of politically weaponized and selfish individuals who would use government power in order to attack and harass the innocent. I pray, Lord, that you will move in your power. Protect this president. Protect this president supernaturally from all the malice and hatred and destruction. Every word, dream, or scheme of assassination is vetoed and broken by the power of the blood of Jesus Christ. There will be no weapon formed against him that will prosper, nor against his household. But that you will continue to put the oil upon him to make him elusive from his enemies, continue to give him supernatural wisdom and peace of mind, continue to give his administration stability and strength and good judgment. And I pray, Lord, an extension of mercy for America. And I pray that the youth will indeed have their revival. The college campuses will become the new foundation of the awakening. And they're going to raise up bold, powerful, articulate young men and women who will push back against the takeover of the university systems and have vast appeal with the supernatural signs and wonders of Jesus upon all of us, Lord. Lord, increase our gifts, increase our anointing, increase our evangelism acumen, increase our ability, Lord, to become all things to all men. In Jesus' name. Hallelujah. You with me on that? All right, my job is to obviously strengthen and contend for the faith by revealing the truth of what's going on. And many of you have different jobs. I respect all of your jobs. But let's pull together. Share this broadcast. Share this with other people. Share it with others. And you're going to be looking for our conferences coming up in places like San Diego and in various parts of the country. We'll be getting together. We're going to be having some great gatherings because this is a great hour for creativity to be aroused. Love you all. Down to 2% battery life. I better go. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Lance Wallnau, but you already know that. Did you know that you can subscribe, however? You just push that button right there or over there and ding. Now we're connected. Look forward to seeing you soon.